BioWare have slapped up a new Mass Effect Legendary Edition blog, detailing tons of new information with regards to the Mass Effect Trilogy remaster, which is coming out just next month. And since I'm more than happy to throw more Mass Effect content up on this channel, we're definitely going to delve into these new details. There are also some new screenshots of the remaster and some new gameplay footage that was posted by IGN, comparing the Legendary Edition to the originals, so there's really plenty to be discussing, so let's get cracking. So to break it down, the blog post is split up into 5 segments. Combat tuning in Mass Effect 1, additional gameplay improvements, the Mako in Mass Effect 1, unifying and modernizing the trilogy, and a Galaxy at War rebalancing, Mass Effect 3. I do not necessarily know what these titles mean just by looking at them, but we're going to go through it anyway, so it'll be no worries. The first segment talks about combat tuning for Mass Effect 1, in which we get this screenshot to look at, which shows us just how much Mass Effect 1 has visually changed for one, but it serves as a visual to represent the combat and the changes made, I suppose. So what are the new changes that have been listed? This segment begins by talking about the balance that BioWare wanted to find between improving upon the game's combat and preserving the feel of it. Mass Effect 1's combat was heavily influenced by traditional RPG mechanics like the randomness of a dice roll and pen and paper stat building, and they wanted to maintain that. And I feel like it's kind of important for a remaster, not so much necessarily remakes, to not stray too far from the source material in the sense where it feels like a completely different game. As when it comes to remakes, the question I feel developers should be asking is, what if we made this game today? Whereas with remasters it's more a case of, how can we modernize this game in a way that stays true to the original version but makes it more accessible to newer players? That being said, BioWare are addressing and resolving some of the more frustrating issues with Mass Effect 1's combat. Firstly, weapon accuracy has been tuned across all weapons to allow players to maintain more consistent firepower while still managing their shots' overheat meter. This is something I quite like. The accuracy in Mass Effect 1 was often inaccurate. It wasn't the most fun gunplay of any game I've ever played. It was honestly a more find some cover and hope for the best sort of situation. Also, the aiming down the sight's view has been made tighter so that it's more accurate, improving the game's accuracy, so missing is more down to the player rather than just tough luck, is definitely a good move. It also makes sense to stick with overheating rather than switching to thermal clips, which were used in 2 and 3, as that would be an unnecessary mechanic change that could cause more harm than good and not really enhance the experience at all. They've also improved the aim assist to provide better precision. Apparently these small improvements should collectively make the combat much snappier, putting more control into the player's hands, which I think is a good thing. Furthermore, abilities have also been rebalanced. The example given is the immunity ability, which now grants a powerful defensive buff that lasts a brief period of time instead of being a small buff that lasts indefinitely, which definitely would bring the Mass Effect 1 abilities in line with the rest of the trilogy, where they'd grant brief buffs or allow you to perform very powerful attacks, which kind of gives the abilities a purpose. Because when it comes down to the abilities that you don't feel the effects of immediately, even if it's just a brief one, they're not very useful. As far as other tweaks are concerned, Shepard can now sprint out of combat. I don't necessarily know what that means. Does it mean he can sprint away from combat, or does it mean you can sprint while not in combat? Because I remember the latter being something of an irritation, though sometimes you could just sprint while out of combat. But it wasn't always, so I really hope it does mean that. Melee attacks are now mapped to a button press rather than being automatically triggered based on the proximity of an enemy. While it definitely had its uses to not have to worry about using a separate button to attack somebody in close quarters, I think this just puts more control in the player's hands, which is very good. All relevant enemies now take headshot damage in the first game. Previously, some enemies didn't do this, including humanoid enemies, and it was quite annoying because you feel like a headshot should do more damage, whereas it just didn't. So introducing headshot damage to these enemy types where it's relevant is quite useful, because that then encourages you to use these improvements to the aiming in the game. While making sure you hit is always important, making sure that you hit a critical spot will make the combat much more precise in feeling. Ammo mods such as anti-organic and anti-synthetic and etc. can now drop throughout the entire game. Previously at higher levels, these would stop dropping, and they can also now be purchased from merchants. Meaning if you're going out of your way to look for an edge such as ammo mods, then you'll find them quite easily. Whereas before, finding them was quite the arseache, especially later on in your playthrough. All weapons can now be used by any class without penalty. Specializations, the ability to train/upgrade certain weapons, are still class specific. BioWare, thank you. Playing Mass Effect 1 as anything but a soldier was always an arse ache. It's good that there's still balance in there, but in Mass Effect 1 this honestly felt a tad too punishing at times. Weapons also cool down much faster. This is very useful because the amount of times you'll be caught short while your weapon's overheated is insane. I don't know if the cooldown applies to overheat, but if it cools down faster outside of it, there'll be less chance of getting up to overheating your weapon, and so the end result is you'll be doing more damage quicker, which is definitely an improvement in the combat department. Medigel usage has also been improved, the base cooldown has been reduced, the leveling benefits have increased, and they've increased the Ara's bonus to cooldowns. It could definitely help make the more impossible feeling overwhelming situations a little bit survivable at the very least. Sometimes you just get slaughtered in Mass Effect 1, to be fair. This won't necessarily see a huge difference there, but it might be useful for your squad mates to not be dying every 30 seconds. Inventory management has also been improved. Items can now be flagged as junk. Junk items can be converted into Omnigel or sold to merchants at once, and the inventory in stores now have a sorting functionality, which is very useful. So if you find yourself opening your inventory for the first time in hours, you don't have to filter through hundreds of things you've acquired just to break them down individually into Omnigel, as I presume you can now do it en masse. Also, a sorting feature will make navigating stores and your own inventory a little bit less confusing, which is always a plus. Also, weapon powers, i.e. those that are unlocked on each weapon's skill type tree, have been improved, with the effectiveness and strength increased, duration sometimes is reduced, and heat now resets on power activation. So if you activate a power, the gun's heat resets so that you don't overheat the gun using the power on the weapon and then wasting it, because most of the time with it active is spent with the gun cooling down. It appears as if rebalancing is the word with Mass Effect 1's remastered combat, and hopefully the gameplay improvements on top can make for a much more pleasant combat experience, because to say it nicely, Mass Effect 1's combat didn't age well. I mean, it's fine, I find it to be playable, it's just dated. The next segment in the blog post discusses additional gameplay improvements. Interestingly, the opening paragraph of this segment states that they found a few opportunities to bring the first game in line with the second and third, but they also found some systems across the whole trilogy that needed a tune-up, specifically with regards to changes to encounters, enemies, and how you engage in combat. The blog states that they've reworked some boss rooms to keep them familiar but making them less cramped, with much more cover to protect you from, say, biotic abilities. The example they give is the boss fight on Novaria, which, if you've played Mass Effect 1, you know that one can be a bit of a pain in the arse if you keep getting thrown about the place. They've also made other updates, such as squad mates in Mass Effect 1 can now be commanded individually as opposed to just being commanded together, which brings it more in line with Mass Effect 2 and 3. Some boss fights and enemy types have been tweaked to be fairer for players, but are still challenging. Apparently cover has been improved across the entire trilogy, providing additional cover to some encounters, and entering and exiting cover is now much more reliable. Experience points gained during the first game has been rebalanced for better consistency, especially towards the game's end. Players who complete most aspects of the game should be able to more reliably get to higher levels on a single playthrough, rather than needing to play through a second time to do so. Furthermore, Mass Effect 1's level cap has been removed. They've also tweaked the ammunition in Mass Effect 2. They found that the ammo was spawning too scarcely in the original game, so they increased the drop rate for ammo in Mass Effect 2, particularly when using a sniper rifle, since that had a reduced ammo drop rate in the original release. I suppose this means using the weapons you want to use will always have something of a reliable playthrough, as if you want to use the sniper rifle in Mass Effect 2, at times it could be a little bit difficult to find ammunition for it. This means the game is more open to you embracing your playstyle. That brings us to the end of that particular segment of the blog. The next segment is dedicated specifically to the Mako in Mass Effect 1. Oh dear god. In Mass Effect 1's original release, the Mako's handling was so bad that it was good. The debate as to whether or not it was meant to bounce around like that, or if Commander Shepard was just a shit driver, has always been entertaining to me. However, unfortunately, I could easily see that old driving mechanic being a little bit of a pain in the arse for newer players. Apparently the Mako is now a much smoother ride while still being lovable like before, which in brackets means you can still drive it off cliffs to your heart's content, which is exactly what I do, just not necessarily in a video game. So the physics have been tuned to make the Mako less bouncy and light, so it's more weighted and stays on the ground more, which means you're less likely to lose control and jackknife the Mako into a pit of lava. We've all done it. Or am I the only one? shit. Apparently the Mako has been improved with faster shield recharging and new thrusters added to the rear, allowing for a speed boost when you're inevitably trying to scale up the side of a near vertical cliff, which is something that I would have really appreciated in the original Mass Effect, to be fair. The amount of times where I thought, oh, you know what, a speed boost would have been useful here, and now we're going to know if they are actually useful or not. This boost is apparently independent from the jump jets on the vehicle's underside, so you can use both at once or separately if you so wish to in quick succession, as they recharge separately. They've also apparently improved camera controls, which resolved issues preventing the Mako from accurately aiming at lower angles, which is useful. Aiming in the Mako could sometimes be quite the pain, especially when you don't know quite what you're doing wrong. So I'd imagine this will also extend to aiming while just driving around, which allows you to use the gun and move the vehicle. Sometimes you can only do one or the other really, as you just have zero accuracy when on the move, which would be a pain, especially when fighting Thresher Moors. I think somebody in that IGN video says something to that effect, but this is mostly just me being wishful. The XP penalty for being in the Mako has also been removed, and touching lava no longer results in an instant mission failure and instead deals damage over time, which will be far less frustrating if it turns out you can still jackknife the thing accidentally into lava, which if they've made it less punishing here means a lot of people have been doing that, which makes me feel a lot less stupid. In the IGN video it showcased some Mako gameplay from the remaster, and it definitely does look a lot finer to control, a lot weightier, and it's good to see the apparent improvements in this area, but until we actually play the game itself, whether or not it feels better or worse, we don't know yet. The next segment discusses unifying and modernizing the trilogy, where BioWare states their goal was to tune up the trilogy and make it more consistent from game to game, while honouring the things that made each title unique. The biggest example they give is the fact that they've unified Shepard's customization options in the character creator and even added some new options, such as additional skin tones and hairstyles, and you can use the same character creator code across all 3 games, meaning your Shepard can now have a consistent appearance across the trilogy. If you remember creating a custom Shepard in Mass Effect 1, by the time you got to 2, you had an abomination on your hands. No matter how hard you tried, that was always the end result, so a lot of players would just opt for using the defaults, including myself. You can also choose to change the appearance at the start of each title if you so wish to, but you could have done that in the originals anyway, I believe. Customization options and character appearances have also been improved with updated textures and hair models. Apparently the default option for female Shepard in Mass Effect 3 is now the default female option in all 3 games, though the original female Shepard designs are still available as a preset option. Also apparently you can use the casual appearances from Mass Effect 3 in Mass Effect 2 while on the Normandy, such as the N7 hoodie and the leather jacket. That's not in the blog, but I did see it in the IGN video. Also, weapons and armor DLC packs are now integrated naturally into the game. They're obtainable via research or by purchasing them from merchants as you progress through the game, rather than being immediately unlocked from the start. This ensures overall balance and progression across Mass Effect 2 and 3. That being said, the Recon hood from Mass Effect 2 and the Cerberus Ajax armor from Mass Effect 3 are available at the start of each game. Moving on, the Mass Effect Genesis comics by Dark Horse have been integrated into the base experience before Mass Effect 2 and 3, as an optional experience so players can make choices from previous games no matter where they choose to start. The trilogy now has a unified launcher, which includes trilogy-wide settings for subtitles and languages, and saves are still unique to each game and can be managed independently of each other. New achievements have also apparently been added to the trilogy. Progress for some achievements now carries over across all 3 games, for example, killing 250 enemies across all games. Achievements that were streamlined into one and made redundant were removed, and a number of achievements have had their objectives and/or descriptions and/or their names updated. As for additional gameplay and quality of life improvements, audio is remixed and enhanced across all games. Hundreds of legacy bugs from the original release are fixed. Legacy bugs. I don't know if that's actually lingo, it more than likely is, but it is just funny. And there's native controller and 21:9 display support on PC with DirectX 11 compatibility. None of the original releases for the Mass Effect trilogy had controller support on PC, you had to either mod it or use keyboard and mouse. That being said, I kind of prefer using keyboard and mouse on PC with Mass Effect. The final segment of this blog is Galaxy at War rebalancing, which tells us that the which tells us that Mass Effect 3's galactic readiness no longer requires external factors such as the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer or old companion app, neither of which will be used in the remaster. Apparently, the more content you complete across the entire trilogy, the more likely you'll be prepared for the final fights in its conclusion. If you only play Mass Effect 3, you'll have to do just about every option available in the game to be eligible for an ending that doesn't result in massive galactic losses, and playing the first 2 games and carrying over your progress will be the most reliable way to get good results in the final hours of the Reaper War. For comparison, apparently if you previously played the Mass Effect 3 extended cut, which included a rebalancing of the galactic readiness, fully preparing for the fight will be much more difficult to achieve in the Legendary Edition. The blog also states that the extended cut ending is now the game's default finale, which I suppose is better than the original finale, but just the same I know a lot of fans will be disappointed that they didn't rework the entire ending because it's not the most satisfying thing ever. Apparently galactic readiness will however be made easier by a number of critical bug fixes and back-end improvements made to the Paragon Renegade system in Mass Effect 2, which I suppose will be useful. The Paragon and Renegade system in Mass Effect 2 was pretty anal, I think is the best way to describe it. You either had to know the suicide mission like the back of your hand, or you had to absolutely put all your eggs in one basket and get 100% Paragon before the end, or I think it's the same with Renegade, it might be a bit lower actually. And even then, crucial Paragon/Renegade dialogue options may not become available to you. Now I don't mind having to commit to either Paragon or Renegade, I actually quite like that about Mass Effect 2, so it's good to see that BioWare have resolved some of the legacy issues that inhibited accurate reputation stats from being displayed and outright prevented certain dialogue options from being selectable when they should have been. Key moments that impacted Mass Effect 3 after the fact were notoriously difficult to achieve as a result of these issues. One such example that pops to mind off the top of my head is the fallout between Jack and Miranda. These can now be completed more reliably, leading to better results in the story's final act. And this brings us to the end of this massive blog post full of new information with regards to the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. This is shaping up to be an absolute banger of a remaster, and we've only really got a month and a bit to wait until it releases on the 14th of May 2021. I do look forward to it. I'll take any excuse to replay the Mass Effect trilogy. In fact, I'm currently doing a replay through of the Mass Effect trilogy for the I don't even know what time. Over on Twitch, if you want to go ahead and check that out, there's a link in the description. So far it has been proper good fun. And of course I'll link the IGN video, which mostly goes over a lot of the information that we find out about in that blog post, but with some visual comparison and stuff like that as well. And that really brings us to the end of this mega news update for Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Does this sound like it's going to be a good remaster, or does it not really appeal to you yet? Anyway, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be super fantastic. And with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, take care and goodbye.